Really thrilled to have Phil and Kevin here today. For those of you who've been coming to CDXs both in person and virtually, you might have seen Phil on stage. There he is. You got fancy new background. Fantastic. And Kevin, great to see you again. For those of you who don't know American Airlines, I don't know what to tell you. And, by the way, I got my app, it's up, guys. So, I'm going to be asking some tough questions, but welcome. So gentlemen, why don't we just start with some brief introductions here? Name, rank, serial number, a little bit of a day on the life. And Kevin, we'll start with you.
Sure. Hey, Drew, good to see you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having your app. I hope there's an active trip in there. And
there is.
All right. Fantastic.
Out to SFO Thursday to see mom. So yeah.
Awesome. Hi everyone. I'm Kevin MacFarland. I work here at American Airlines in our digital team. So we work on all the customer-facing digital properties, mobile app, website, kiosks, notifications, all that sort of stuff. And then we've also got a pretty large UX practice that works on all of our customer-facing initiatives, but also increasingly on things that help out our employees. And so, we've got 700 systems across the airline. A lot of those have been around a really long time. And so there's a lot of efficiency gains there, but also, where workforce expectations are is very different than where they were when those systems were built. And so, we're helping modernize things like green screens and things in our operations center to be more user-friendly the exact same way we would deal with a customer. So that's what my teams work on.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And Phil.
Yes.
Here comes the troublemaker. Anyway, tell us what you do over there at that small little airline out of Dallas.
Yeah, small little startup. And some of these systems are actually older than me. I know it's hard. It's hard to imagine that. American invented modern IT in 1960 with our partner IBM. So a lot of people don't realize that we are the reason why IT exists. So you can blame us. So I do a bunch of fun stuff here. I work with KMAC a lot, or Kevin MacFarland. I do emerging technology, looking how can we work with startups. I also engage internally with looking for talent in the engineering space. It's very hard to find talent, so we go out to colleges and universities and get talent. And then we also engage internally with our employees, putting on events to get them excited about technology. And it's really been challenging during this last period. How do we engage virtually? So we've had some successes with doing a bunch of virtual events. So a little bit of everything, and I'm here to have some fun. Let's roll.
That's ready to roll. So either of you can jump in here. Just reflecting again on the last 16 months, right? And we know what COVID did to the airline industry, so we don't really reflect on that. But did it give both of you time and your groups and to not only just think, but also maybe invest in systems and emerging platforms and technologies and things like that, that maybe if it was kind of normal operations, you didn't get a chance to, but just what's bubbled up to the top as you reflect back as it relates to your roles and making the customer experience better? Either of you can jump in.
Sure, I can start. Last year, the last 16 months, have been pretty rough for us. And along with that, we're a lot smaller in terms of resources than we used to be. And with that, we had a lot of quiet time too, where the operation was at a point that so few folks were traveling. We had never really seen a time like that, right? And so those two things coming together created a really unique opportunity for us to focus and try some things that we probably never would have been able to try, when things were at full bore. We rolled out something using like iOS app clips, for example, right? Immediately to our airports to let customers not have to touch a kiosk, and those sorts of things would have been so fraught with risk when we were at full volume. And so the unique nature of the moment of COVID, okay, there's a real customer need here to not touch this thing, but also, hey, we feel like we can do this and test it and we're only going to do good. That's generally our mantra, but I think this presented really unique opportunities. But also, having 700 systems and a huge operation, right? There were a lot of competing priorities. So just as a company, it was really interesting to see how quickly we narrowed focus on a few things that were really important. And obviously, customer peace of mind and safety was right at the heart of that. And we were able to use a lot of tech to power that.
That's great. Phil, kind of same question. Maybe you've had a little bit more time to think about talent. You did some great hackathons with the HBCUs and things like that, and recruited some great engineers. But what else have you been able to reflect? Looking back, you got to spend a little more time on, and it's informed how you move forward.
I think just how resilient our team members are, everybody pitched together and came up with, interesting ways to solve problems virtually. And just to see the amount of work that we were able to get done and being very productive, right? Gives us new insight into the remote worker. Although we encourage everybody to travel, right? We want everybody to travel, to do that sales pitch and to go to that conference, right? So we want you in those awesome aircraft, which is the youngest in the fleet, by the way, youngest fleet in the system, by the way. So I think it gave me a new encouragement for our team members and our customers, right? Our customers went through a lot. And so I think it just gave us some time to reflect and say, hey, how do we really connect with the customer? So that was important.
And what are the priorities now moving forward, guys, as it relates to customer experience? I mean, I would say it's been interesting because I've been with American a long time and downloaded the app on version probably 1.0. And it is fantastic, by the way. And I tease you a lot about the app, but it is fantastic. And it seems to me, as just a consumer, it really is more even broadly about the broader travel experience, right? It isn't just me and getting to my gate and changing my seats. There's food and trying to, maybe connect them with rideshare eventually. But what's your strategic approach to the customer experience moving forward? And is it truly just sort of mobile first? I mean, do you kind of start there? But either of you can jump in on that question.
Yeah, I think we do think about mobile first in terms of technology, but where we start is always the customer, right? And so like what we think about a lot, and I would say the strategy hasn't changed, but the tactics and some of the concerns have changed as COVID has hit, and what customers are worried about has shifted, and also the type of customer that we're seeing has shifted. So at the end of the day, right, LTR, NPS, whatever customer satisfaction measure, you guys use, is about setting an expectation and meeting or exceeding it. And in a lot of ways, we have parts of the experience where it's completely out of our control. Right. Which is, something we've got to solve for. But it's also when customers feel out of control, SAT plummets, right? And so security has been a great example of this for years, right? It's like we can do everything great to get that customer to that line, but if that experience doesn't go well, that customer feels out of control and SAT sinks. And so as COVID hit, just the things that they were worried about started to shift, right? And as you guys who have traveled know, or if you haven't, you can imagine, right? Things are drastically more complicated, right? As folks get vaccinated, some of those things are rolling back, but when do I need to start wearing a mask? Do I need to have a vaccine to go to the Caribbean? What do I need to quarantine? All of those sorts of things, have now presented themselves, but it's hard true. It's the same, customer strategy, which is how do we give customers peace of mind? How do we set a clear expectation? And how do we remove as much of that friction in our control as we can? And, things like mobile and notifications have been a great way to do that, right? Also things like we launched virtual assistant and chat, right? Customers just have a lot more questions. They've always had a lot of questions, but specifically around international travel, it's super complicated now. So what can we do to help answer those questions? We're building out some things in the app that sort of help customers step through step by step, because now every country on the planet pretty much has a different criteria to let folks in. And that's a pretty intense change, right?
Yeah. And Phil, sort of same question, but in the context of looking at the emerging side, and because you do look at a lot of emerging tech and new technologies, and you work with Kyle Lloyd, who's joined us before, certainly looking at, working with startups and partnerships and things like that. What are you looking to add to the customer experience that emerging tech might help you? And what's your approach to, considering emerging tech, testing it, deciding whether to utilize it? Talk to us a little bit about the future and what your priorities are.
The future in the year 2000. So I think the art is to know what not to do, and what is going to be meaningful for your customer. and make sure that you understand that you're looking at privacy and convenience, and you're not getting in the way. If you do something that stops their check-in process or adds another step, that's not a good experience. So we look with new startups and tech that could help the customer experience. We do a lot of things well in America, right? We have a lot of our own internal systems. So it's got to be the right connection with that startup where they have a unique value that we can partner together. And so usually it's access to our data and our systems that really help these startups launch a product sometimes. So we typically like to go with a startup that we can help launch them and be very instrumental in their success. And we've done that with a few.
What might we see in the app and the sort of overall travel experience for customers? Like, is there a priority for this year in terms of what we really like to add this type of functionality to the app for our customers?
So it's a lot around solving the challenge that now is international travel, Drew. So we've partnered with a startup out of Canada called Sherpa. We thought they had a great visa product, which is all about removing friction as customers travel across borders, and they pivoted to restriction data, right? And we think they have the best set of data in the world, and they keep it updated. And so there's a lot of work going on around that. Another big change that's happened in our industry, which I feel great about, and it's great for customers, is we now live in a world where there aren't change fees anymore, right? And so we're putting a lot of time and energy into, okay, how would customers now want to interact with this differently, and how do we make it easier to leverage that benefit and give customers peace of mind that their money's safe and that they can move to another flight. And so there's a big body of work happening there as well. And then
change fees. I even asked the question of whether
those are not, they're called enhancement fees.
Yeah.
Gone forever. Can I you have to get into that.
No.
Not on the record. We're not the revenue management folks, but I think for the foreseeable future, they're not coming back.
Yeah.
And the other thing we've been super focused on is our alliances and our partnerships. We launched some great domestic partnerships with our friends at Alaska and JetBlue this year, right? And that's how we're really helping bring more to our customers with the network we already have.
No, that's great. And I encourage anyone out there if they have any questions, there's the Q&A. Try not to use the chat function, use the little Q&A icon down there. And guys, we talked a little bit about, employees and finding innovation and finding that across sort of the employee base as well, in addition to working with partners and startups. And Phil, maybe you can talk a little bit about that in terms of, you have this great hackathon, which I've had the privilege of judging. I hope it comes back next year, where you got up to 1,000, hackers, and they were all employees. It was amazing. And I think it started with maybe 40 or 50 people, all solving real world problems, both customer facing and a lot of internal operations types of problems.
Yeah.
But talk to us a little bit about where you're finding innovation internally.
Yeah. I can't come up with good ideas, so I steal them from my internal team members when we put on these events, and I take credit for them. We have a great time, and even during this situation, we've done it large ones virtually. And so it's hard to pull those off because it's about the personal connection, about being there, coming up with these good ideas. But then also it's a good way to find talent. So when you were at our last one, we invited some college students that were going to graduate that year to our actual internal hackathon. And we've hired talent that way. We find to get talent, they have to understand that there's a culture at American about innovation and learning. And we also are a tech company. All we are is a tech company, and we happen to fly aircraft. Right. We're tech on wings. So we love tech. And so we have a great place for new talent, but also around those ideas. Some of these ideas are really awesome for our industry. Like we had one at the last hack, we're using existing cameras at the gate with machine learning to identify what's going on with the aircraft, and systematically telling us, hey, food was delivered, or fuel was delivered, or we're still waiting on this, or there's something left on the tarmac, all kinds of cool things that we can do with machine learning, image recognition. And actually out of that hack, that idea won. And we just last week were rewarded a patent from the patent office on that idea. So, great ways for employees to stay engaged. And if you go to your employees for that innovation, they're gonna stay with you, and it's gonna be the best thing than trying to outsource it. Your employees have the best ideas.
Right, for sure. And Kevin, in regards to, obviously Phil gets pitched a lot of tech from startups, and I'm sure you do as well. Kevin, do you have advice for startups, whether they're sort of, a couple guys in a garage, even up through graduated startups, about the best way to approach, large enterprises like yourself? And turn out there are a lot of the folks come in, we have this great technology, and you see a kernel of hope there, and you say, this is great, but it's just, you're not quite ready for prime time and scale, right? So any advice, in terms of, hey, I think I've got this great technology that I think American Airlines can use, and the best way to approach large enterprises?
Yeah, scale is always a problem, and a startup's never going to have that. But understanding that you don't have it, and being straightforward about what you need to succeed, I think is important. But also find an advocate, right? And then use that advocate to understand who the decision makers are. Like in any corporation, it's going to take multiple folks generally to get in somewhere and to get something moving, right? And so, if you're a startup who's working on payments, well, there's an accounting team and there's all these other things, right? And I think, having the wherewithal to understand, hey, you've got to convince probably more than one person to get this done, but also that this is going to be a longer cycle, right? And if you're not committed to that longer cycle, and it's gonna harm your startup, right, where you're putting way too much money into something that's still speculative, then know that going in, because I think we see folks who get frustrated with how long it takes sometimes, right? Or how long,
Sure.
Especially anything that's going to touch our data, you're going to have to sign some pretty heavy duty documents, right? Like we're not just going to start feeding you, millions of travelers' customer data without it being bulletproof. And if you can't pay for lawyers, so I think it's just some of those practical things. But that's why we have folks like Phil and Kyle who are great at saying, look, guys, we think this is an awesome idea. We think you got a really cool team. Like, here's what it's going to take to start to engage with us and really help set that stage for them.
Yeah, and let me continue with you, Kevin, and then Phil, I'll turn it to looking at the future again and specifically diving into user experience, the UX as part of the broader sort of customer experience. Whether it's from a startup, whether it comes internally, where are your pain points still? Like, what are you looking for as it relates to sort of technology solutions, product solutions, innovation that's going to help, wherever your priorities are as it relates to UX and CX this year? Like if I could have this, could I better integrate my data across 700 systems or whatever it might be? What are you really looking for to help drive the UX and CX that you want to push forward for your customers?
A lot of things. So I think the pain points have changed, Drew, right? So the mission is the same, which is remove friction, right? But just staying in sync with your customers. I came in at the end of your talk with the last group, and I think Patty nailed it there at the end, right? Is actually talk to your customers and understand it, right? We spend a lot of time, we miss it. We used to run a lot of usability sessions in the Admirals clubs at the airports and talk to real customers, run them through real prototypes. We've got a lab here in the building that hopefully will get folks in. We've been using remote tools like usertesting.com to source cohorts, but just talk to folks, right? Because in a world that moves this quick, and COVID made it move quicker in some ways, especially for our business, you've got to stay talking to them. And they're just like to Phil's point about your employees are going to lead you to the good ideas internally. Your customers are going to tell you what they want if you're listening. And that is the heart of it, right? And then if enough folks are saying something, we take it seriously.
Phil, same question.
That was a great answer.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was a good idea. Where do you anticipate the pain points to be?
Well, I think just getting people back into the cadence of travel and all these questions that they're going to have. I mean, I had it myself a couple of days ago. I was, we were contemplating taking a trip, and just, I was just overwhelmed of how much you need to research and know about travel. But I think once we get past that, and people get into a cadence, I think we're going to be back on track, and we need to travel. People need to travel. We love to travel. We need to see people. We need to do business. So I think the biggest thing that we're concerned about is just getting this primed again and going, but then making sure that we have our systems ready if this does happen again, God forbid. But I think we need to get ready for how do we anticipate this and make this less stressful.
And sort of building a little bit on what I was asking Kevin about, working with startups, and you've more or less sort of run this open innovation effort for American for quite a while. But you never had, you had Kyle in the Valley for a while. He's now in Austin, but you never had like a big lab type of a thing. Looks like you're building one internally. You never had huge teams. I'm just curious about, what you've learned as it relates to open innovation and sort of best practices, for a very large company that hasn't necessarily felt, oh, we have to have some lab with 100 people in it. How have you managed it and managed it well?
Well, yeah, it's being lean and understanding how to partner with innovation outside of your company. Even though you can get it internally, I think you don't need a massive lab, and we probably won't because of the cost of that. But I think you just got to be open and know that there are certain technologies that you can just pass on, right? I mean, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to do blockchain because people want to do blockchain. Just
Right.
focus on the key technologies that will complement your systems, and make sure that you partner with people that can pivot and can work with a large enterprise. I think those are key. That you make sure that you don't assume that you have all the answers, and you're willing to be open and working with these small, nimble companies.
Right. And well, you mentioned blockchain. So I mean, we had a blockchain hype cycle.
Remember, everybody had blockchain on their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, right.
And it went away.
I did a conference on blockchain too. So I'm just curious, is this something that is still on your radar? Is it a technology, really is just a database, but I mean, is there any applications for it anywhere across sort of the enterprise that you foresee?
There's some things that are interesting where we exchange things between other airlines, and it's all anything that's like a paper tabulation system of keeping record. Sure, there might be some things there, but we have massive databases, and yeah, all it is a public ledger. It's very specifically for crypto, right? But then everybody try to find that's another reason why I talk about it. Just because you're in innovation doesn't mean you have to innovate all the time, right? So you don't have to go after all these shiny new objects. I remember beacons was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And that never panned out. K-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would start with, does it solve a problem for your customers or your employees? And
Right.
like, oftentimes these things don't, and I think we're not in a true tech R&D space where we're just going to go explore something and hope it turns into some patents or products, right? So, we love talking about new tech, we stay up on it, but if we don't see a way that it solves a problem, like, we don't really engage, right? And so to your question about blockchain, Phil and I laugh all the time because everyone tells us it's going to save the airline, right? Whether it's loyalty or payments or this or that. And like our loyalty program doesn't have a problem. Our customers are not saying there's a problem in paying us. But, blockchain, we looked at early on for these healthcare credentials, right? It was one of the ideas being floated around. And, we looked at it and it wasn't efficient. It wasn't what governments were asking us to provide to them. And it didn't really solve the problem any better than some of the other solutions we're looking at. So we quickly passed, rather than getting wedded to the technology, we stayed focused on the problem.
Interesting. One thing I want to touch on before we have to wrap is this idea around user experience. And Kevin, I'll start with you. Is there a design philosophy or approach there in your group and the people you work with that are, coding the best possible user experience? Do you have a philosophy around UX? And how does that inform sort of product development or innovation?
Yeah, we do. I mean, and it's not anything super unique, right? We do user-centric design. It's all about the customer, right? We use D-School, modified version of the standard D-School, double diamond for how we go through that and design thinking, and then we let individual products sort of figure out what their mix needs to look like. So a couple of years ago, we moved to more full stack product designers instead of having full stack research and information architecture and visual designers. We've moved to this more product designer hybrid model, which lets us move things around, right? Because there's parts of the business that are much more on the experience design end, where the problem could be a process improvement and some stanchions. Right. And then there's hardcore visual interactive stuff like the mobile app. And so, we have these core principles around how we approach design and how we talk to users and customers, but then we let it within each portfolio and product sort of organically solve that problem. And then the other thing we're passionate about is we've stopped doing the agency model and we really embed, right? So design needs to be a core part of your product. Otherwise, it's a Band-Aid, right?
Thoughts on that, Phil, as well?
Just get out of the way of the customer,
Right.
Try not to interject yourself when you don't need to. Imagine they've got a couple kids that are, yelling at them and they're trying to get their luggage through TSA. There's so much stress that goes on, and that's what K-Mac, his team really do a good job at. When does it make sense to bubble up something, and when do we just leave you alone?
Right. No, exactly. So I would have to at least ask a little bit about data, and I kind of specifically want to dig in on artificial intelligence before we go, because we could do a whole conference on data and talk all day about data. So I'm just curious, as it relates to things like AI and informing your broader sort of CX and UX philosophy and initiatives, and how can it improve the relationship with the customer? Where can it remove friction? Maybe it can, people don't have to call the call center as often. But Phil, I'll start with you just in terms of, I know AI is big on your radar. You go to AI conferences. Where does AI fit into this whole sort of customer experience and user experience for you guys?
Yeah, I think we knew early on that it was going to be important. And now we understand we got to be careful on how you use it, and consumers' understanding of AI and backlash with privacy and security. So make sure you use AI in an appropriate manner, and also make sure when you involve your employees that they don't think that this new system is replacing them, because you can never replace your employees. You just need to have them do other things to help your customer. So I think we're really looking at machine learning and analytics of data, and seeing how that can help the customer. And if we can predict an impact to you in the next 15 minutes, then great, then we can solve it. So that's how we're looking at it.
Hey, Kevin, thoughts on AI and any other thoughts on data as well?
Yeah, I mean, along with, Phil's point about inventing IT, American also essentially invented modern revenue management, which is how do you crunch all of this demand data and come up with pricing? So it's just core to what we do in a lot of areas, and I would say, while ML has moved along and AI, it's the same problem, which is make sure you're solving a problem, right? You don't have to have all of the data. I see there's a John Rossi on here. I don't know if that's the one that we work with, but we work with a company called ASAP out of New York City, who powers our virtual assistant and chat function, right? And they have their ML that's tuned to answering customers' questions, and that's fantastic. It's a one-off. It doesn't need to have every piece of data across the entire organization to be able to do that, right? A lot of folks think you need these Google-sized data sets to do it. Granted, we throw off a lot more data than maybe companies who are significantly smaller than us, but again, just focus on what the problem you're trying to solve is, and not trying to get all the data in one place, or I can't get started until I have some crazy 360 view of the customer that I'll never ever get installed.
Right, exactly. Well, let me wrap with this last question, guys, and it comes from the audience. I'm glad we got an audience question in. So, and either of you can take it. Does your CX practice and innovation integrate with brand strategy management, your brand strategy management team, other practices within the corporation?
Yeah, 100%. So, we work across the organization. That includes the marketing and brand team. As we work through our design system, we're helping figure out, okay, how do we have a brand system along that makes these components feel like American and behave like American, but also help development teams go faster because they're not starting from scratch all the time. So absolutely.
And I'll just add another vector. Develop your apps and processes with empathy for your customer, and make sure that you embrace a diverse skill set when you're developing these products. If your team doesn't represent how your customer looks, then you're going to be off to the wrong start on developing that.
No, that's great. And finally, guys, what excites you about the future? Emerging tech, you can pick one emerging tech. Obviously just flying again is exciting enough. But what's on your radar in terms of some of that blue sky kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, flying again was going to be mine, Drew. So,
yeah, right.
I think it's how the world has changed from this, right? And, I think if you look at these things like vaccine credentials and all the stuff around health, I think there's a lot of thorny politics and privacy things there, but I also think we have a chance for those technologies to become more commonplace and to help prevent these things in the future and to help us contain these things and to keep people safe and keep the world moving. And so I hope that those things continue forward and continue to be developed. So to Phil's earlier point, the next time something flares up, we're able to control it and save lives and keep the world moving.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks so much. I know you're super busy. It's great to get both of you here. And
Yes.
I hope we're having a beer somewhere in person, really soon.
We encourage everybody to fly and have a beer.
Yeah, come on down. The office is open.
We're open for business. Let's go.
Yeah.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing the
Drew.
lab too. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Yeah, cool.
Drew.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.